My son-in-law leaned close to my daughter and whispered, "We'll kick him out after Christmas," like I was a broken chair they planned to drag to the curb. I heard every syllable, and I smiled like I didn't. What would you do if you realized the people you love were scheduling your exile like an appointment? Read to the end and tell me if I went too far, because what happened next was all legal. And that is the part that still chills me. My name is Timothy Barton. I'm 68 years old, a grandfather, a widower, and a retired electrical contractor who spent 4 decades wiring other people's comfort into their walls. I have 1 daughter, Claire, and 2 grandchildren, Lily and Evan. This story starts 3 weeks before Christmas, the moment I realized my family wasn't gathering to celebrate me anymore. They were gathering to replace me. After my wife Marlene died, I did what a lot of men my age do when the house turns quiet enough to hear your own thoughts. I tried to stay useful. I tried to stay close. Claire begged me to move into their finished basement, just for a while. She said she worried about me living alone. Jason, her husband, nodded the whole time like a man agreeing to adopt a stray dog. I told myself the tension was grief. I told myself I was imagining the way Jason's smile never reached his eyes. The first year, I paid half their mortgage without being asked. I watched their kids while they worked. I fixed the fence. I repaired the furnace. I replaced the dishwasher. I did it because I loved them, and because doing something felt better than sitting alone with Marlene's empty chair. Then Jason started calling it our arrangement. If I was watching the kids, he'd say it in front of Claire. This is why it works. Everyone contributes. If I paid for the holiday groceries, he'd grin and say, "Tim's got it. He likes to feel needed." If I cooked, he'd inspect the table like a supervisor and say, "Looks good." The kids need consistency. Consistency. That word became his leash. By the time Lily turned 9, the basement wasn't a temporary landing spot anymore. It was a holding pen. I had my own entrance, my own small kitchenette, my own bathroom. On paper, I had privacy. In reality, I had a cage that kept me close enough to be useful and far enough to be ignored. It still might have stayed that way if not for the week Jason decided he was done pretending. It started with a Christmas list. Claire sat at the kitchen island writing gifts in neat columns, and Jason stood behind her with his phone in his hand, tapping and frowning as if the holiday itself was an expense report. "We need to talk about after the holidays," he said. Claire didn't look up. "After the holidays, what?" Jason's eyes flicked toward the basement door. "About your dad." Claire sighed the way she used to sigh when she was 16 and I told her she couldn't go to a party. "Jason, please." "I'm serious," he said, lower now. "It's time." I was in the hallway, carrying a basket of clean laundry I'd folded for the kids. I froze without meaning to. I didn't want to eavesdrop. I also didn't want to miss whatever sentence might explain why my son-in-law was suddenly speaking about me like a problem to be solved. Claire's pen stopped moving. "Time for what?" Jason leaned closer and said the words that changed my blood temperature. "Time for him to go somewhere else." Claire's shoulders stiffened. "He's my father." "And he's getting older," Jason replied. "He forgets things. He leaves lights on. He could fall. He could, you know." I did leave lights on sometimes. I also built half the electrical grid in our county. But I understood what Jason was doing. He was laying the foundation. Concern, safety, responsibility. The polite wrapping paper around a theft. Claire's voice was tired. "We already talked about this. He's fine." Jason's tone sharpened. "He's fine until he isn't, and then it's on us. And I'm sorry, Claire, but I'm not spending the next 10 years living with what? With the man who paid your mortgage? With the man who watched your children so you could work late? With the man who lost his wife and didn't collapse because he had to stay steady for you?" Claire pushed her chair back. "He can hear you." Jason smiled. "He's in the basement. He's always in the basement. That sentence landed like a slap. Then, like he couldn't help himself, Jason leaned in, dropped his voice to a whisper, and delivered the line that became my North Star. We'll kick him out after Christmas. It wasn't said with anger. That was the worst part. It was said with certainty, like a plan already approved. Claire didn't argue. She just said, "Not in front of the kids," which told me everything I needed to know about where her spine had gone. I turned and walked back down the basement steps as quietly as I could, laundry basket still in my hands, smiling like a man who hadn't just been sentenced. That night I sat at my small kitchenette table and opened the file folder I kept labeled Barton. Inside were the documents men my age collect like insurance against the future: property deeds, bank statements, wills, life insurance papers, the marriage certificate Marlene insisted we frame, but I never did. I stared at my signature on my will and felt something harden in my chest. Not hatred, clarity. I wasn't going to beg to stay in a place where I was being tolerated. I wasn't going to wait for them to shove me out, broke and confused, while they patted themselves on the back for doing what's best. If they wanted me gone, they were going to learn something I'd learned the first time I wired a house from a cold shell. The walls look solid until you find the main breaker. And I knew where all their breakers were. The next morning, I made coffee, put on my jacket, and drove to my attorney's office. His name was Daniel Hargrove. I'd known him for 20 years. He handled the paperwork when I bought my home, then again when Marlene and I updated our will after Claire got married. Daniel wasn't flashy. He was the kind of man who wore suits like armor and spoke like every word cost money. He listened without interrupting while I told him what I'd heard. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, steepled his fingers, and asked one question. "Do you want to hurt them, Timothy, or do you want to protect yourself?" I thought about Marlene, about her hands, about the way she used to say, "Do not let them make you small." "I want to protect myself," I said, "and I want to make sure they never try this on me again." Daniel nodded once. "Then we do it clean. We do it documented. We do it in a way that survives daylight." He slid a yellow pad toward me. "Start with a list. Everything you pay for them." I almost laughed. The list was long enough to feel embarrassing. Half the mortgage, the kids' private tutoring, the SUV lease, their phone plan, the property taxes some years when Jason's bonus didn't show up, the holiday credit card bill because Claire didn't want the kids to feel less than. Daniel wrote without comment. Then he drew a line under it and said, "Now tell me whose name is on their house." "My name," I said. "And Claire's. I co-signed when they bought it. Jason's credit wasn't great then." Daniel's eyes lifted. "Is Jason on the deed?" "No," I said slowly. "Not on the deed." The room went quiet for a moment. Then Daniel asked, "Do you still own your own house?" "My house is mine," I said. "Paid off." "And do Claire and Jason have access to it?" he asked. "They have a spare key," I admitted, "for emergencies." Daniel's pen stopped. "Any chance they've been inside when you weren't there?" I didn't answer right away because a memory surfaced. Claire mentioning she'd grabbed some old photos from my house while I was at the hardware store. Jason calling me later to ask if I still kept documents in a safe. I felt my stomach sink. "They've been inside," I said. Daniel nodded as if he'd expected that. "Timothy, I'm going to say something unpleasant. People don't whisper about kicking you out after Christmas unless they've already moved pieces on the board." I left his office with a plan and a strange calm. Step 1. Lock down my assets. Step 2. Document their behavior. Step 3. Remove myself from their control. Step 4. Make sure my grandchildren were protected even if their parents imploded. I didn't tell Daniel I also wanted a Step 5. Step 5. Consequences. That afternoon, I drove to my house, the one Marlene and I built our life in. The one that still smelled like cedar in the hallway because she loved cedar candles. The one Jason would have sold without blinking if he could get my signature. I let myself in and went straight to the bedroom. The dresser drawer where I kept spare keys was slightly open. It hadn't been that way when I left last time. My hands didn't shake. That was the part that scared me. I was too calm, too focused, like my body had decided fear was inefficient. I opened the drawer the rest of the way and saw it immediately. The small metal lockbox was turned at a slight angle, as if someone put it back without caring how it sat. I didn't open it. I took out my phone, photographed it, and then I did something Daniel taught me years ago when a contractor tried to cheat me on a permit. I looked for what wasn't supposed to be there. In the bottom of the drawer, tucked beneath old warranty papers, was a folded envelope I didn't recognize. No name, no stamp, just creased paper like someone handled it in a hurry. I opened it. Inside was a blank form, durable power of attorney, pre-filled with my name, my address, and a space for my signature. The agent name line was empty. They weren't planning to ask me to sign it later. They were planning to fill in the agent after they got my signature. The air felt thin in my lungs. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the form like it was a snake, and for the first time since Marlene died, I whispered out loud to an empty room. They were going to take me. Not just kick me out. Take me. My money, my house, my decisions, my freedom. I stood up and moved like a man on rails. I replaced every lock on the house. I installed a simple camera system Daniel recommended, one that sent alerts to my phone. I went to the bank and changed every password, every PIN, every beneficiary designation that still listed Claire for convenience. I opened a new account at a different bank and moved my savings. Then I did the cruelest thing I'd done in my entire life. I stopped paying their bills. Not out of spite, out of necessity. Because a man who is about to be pushed off a cliff doesn't keep handing the cliff builder more bricks. Jason noticed within 48 hours. He came down the basement steps like he owned them, his jaw tight, his phone in his hand. "Hey, Tim," he said, using my name the way you'd use a tool you didn't respect. "The mortgage payment didn't go through." I looked up from my coffee. No, it didn't. His eyebrows rose. "So, you need me to send it again?" "No," I said. "You need to pay it." Jason laughed once, sharp. "Come on, don't start." "I'm not starting," I replied. "I'm stopping." His smile faded. "What is this about?" I set my mug down gently. "I heard you." Jason didn't move. "Heard me what?" I watched his face like I used to watch live wires. The twitch, the false confidence, the way he tried to look bigger than the danger. "I heard you say you'd kick me out after Christmas." The color drained from his cheeks in a slow wave. He recovered fast, because men like Jason always do. He scoffed. "You misheard." "I didn't," I said. He leaned forward, voice low, as if lowering it would lower reality. "Timothy, you live here. Claire and I have been more than generous. The kids love you. We let you let me," I repeated. "In a house my name is on." Jason's eyes narrowed. "Don't do that. Don't play games with legal technicalities." "Legal technicalities are the only reason you have this house," I said calmly. "So you should be careful telling me they don't matter." He straightened, anger pushing his words now. "So you're punishing us? Right before Christmas?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The truth hung between us. He wanted me compliant until the holiday passed. He wanted the photos, the gifts, the performance of family. Then he wanted me gone. Jason stared at me for a long moment, and then he did something that confirmed every fear Daniel planted. He smiled again, not warm, not friendly, a smile like a knife. "Okay," he said. "Fine, we'll talk later." And he walked upstairs like nothing happened. That evening, Lily came down to my basement door holding a book in her hands. She always did that when she wanted to talk without her parents listening. She'd sit on my couch, pretend to read, and then she'd ask the questions kids ask when they sense the ground shifting beneath adults. "Grandpa," she whispered, climbing onto the couch, "Daddy's mad." "I know," I said softly. "It's not your fault." She chewed her lip. "I heard something." My heart thumped once, heavy. "What did you hear, sweetheart?" She glanced toward the stairs and lowered her voice further, gripping my sleeve like she needed an anchor. "Mommy said after Christmas you'll be not here. Daddy said it'll be better because then he can use your room. And Mommy said you won't fight because they'll make you sign stuff." A child should not know what sign stuff means in that tone. The moment she grabbed my sleeve and begged me with her eyes reminded me of how fear looks when it's too big for a small body. I took her hand and squeezed it. "Lily, listen to me. You did a brave thing telling me. You are safe. Evan is safe. I promise." Her eyes filled. "Are you going to leave?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. Not the way they think. Christmas week arrived like a storm. Claire tried to pretend everything was normal. She baked cookies. She played holiday music. She put up decorations with exaggerated cheer. It was the performance of a woman trying to outrun her conscience. Jason, on the other hand, turned cold. He stopped greeting me in the mornings. He stopped asking me to watch the kids, which would have been a gift if he hadn't replaced it with something worse. He began restricting me. If I went upstairs for coffee, he'd appear and say, "Kitchen's busy, use yours." If I sat in the living room with the kids, he'd say, "They need quiet, homework." If I joined dinner, he'd say, "This is a family night." I was family when I paid. I was furniture when I didn't. 2 days before Christmas, Jason played his hand. Claire invited me upstairs, voice gentle, eyes too bright. Jason sat at the dining table with a folder in front of him. "Dad," Claire said, "we've been talking." Jason patted the chair beside him. "Sit down, Tim." I didn't sit. I looked at the folder. "What's that?" I asked. Jason opened it and slid out a form. "Assisted living options, just information." Claire's voice shook. "It's not a nursing home, it's a community. They have activities, people your age." Jason leaned forward. "And it takes pressure off us. Off you. Everyone wins." "I'm not moving," I said. Jason sighed, as if I were a stubborn child. "You're not thinking clearly." I tilted my head. "Because I said no?" "Because you're acting emotional," Jason replied. "You stopped paying bills. You're isolating. You're paranoid. That's not you." That's when I understood the trap. He wasn't just offering a community. He was building a record. Emotional. Paranoid. Not thinking clearly. Those phrases weren't for me. They were for paperwork. He wanted me labeled. He wanted me declared incompetent. He wanted control. Claire reached for my hand. "Dad, please, just look at the brochures." I pulled my hand back. "No." Jason's jaw tightened. "Then we do it the hard way." He stood, walked past me, and called out, "Claire, get the kids ready. We're going to my parents' tomorrow like planned." Then he looked me in the eye and said, as casually as a man discussing weather, "While we're gone, someone from Adult Protective Services might stop by. Just to check in. Don't make it weird." My lungs went tight. He'd already called them. He was already moving pieces. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchenette table with the lights off, staring at my phone, waiting for alerts from the cameras at my house. At 2:17 a.m., I got one. Motion detected. Front door. My house. I watched the live feed and saw a figure in a hooded jacket step onto my porch. The person looked down, pulled something from a pocket and held it up. A key. My spare key. They tried it. The lock didn't turn because I'd changed it. The figure stepped back, cursed silently with a shake of the head, and then walked off the porch. My hands finally started shaking. Not because I was scared, because I was furious. Jason and Claire left the next morning with the kids and a trunk full of gifts, heading to Jason's parents' house 2 hours away. Claire hugged me before she left, and her arms felt like a lie. "Be good," she whispered. Jason stood behind her, watching me like a guard watching an inmate. When their car pulled out of the driveway, I didn't wave. I went upstairs, gathered every scrap of mail with my name on it, and drove straight to Daniel Hargrove's office. Daniel listened to what happened at 2:17 a.m. and didn't look surprised. "They tried to access your house while you were alone," he said, voice flat. "That's not family concern, Timothy. That's intent." He pulled out a document and tapped it with his pen. "We're going to move fast." By noon, my financial accounts were locked down in a way Claire and Jason couldn't touch. My will was rewritten. The new version left nothing directly to Claire. Everything that would have gone to her went into a trust for Lily and Evan, with Daniel as trustee. College, health, necessities, structured, protected, untouchable by parents. If Claire wanted my money, she would have to be the kind of mother who didn't try to steal from her father. Then, Daniel slid another document toward me. "Since your name is on their house," he said, "and you've been paying a substantial portion, you can force a sale or you can negotiate a buyout. But if you want immediate leverage, if you want them to feel the ground move, then you establish that your contributions were conditioned on you being allowed to reside there. You stop the support, and you demand they formalize your tenancy or release you. If they refuse, we can proceed." Proceed. The lawyer word for consequences. I signed what needed signing. Then Daniel said, "Now, tell me about their debts." I stared at him. "How do you know they have debts?" "Because Jason isn't panicking about missing your money," Daniel replied. "He's trying to control you. That means he has other fires burning." I went home and did something I'd avoided for years because it felt invasive. I checked my credit report. The screen loaded, and there it was. 2 credit cards I didn't recognize, opened 6 months ago, both with balances near their limits. A personal loan inquiry from a lender I'd never heard of. A line of credit application that had been denied. All under my name. I sat back in my chair and felt my vision narrow. Jason hadn't just been using my generosity. He'd been using my identity. When I called the credit card companies, the fraud departments asked for details, addresses, phone numbers, email. The answers lined up with Claire and Jason's household information, not mine. I filed a fraud report. The woman on the phone used a gentle voice, as if softness could make betrayal less sharp. "Mr. Barton, this will trigger an investigation." "I want it to," I said. On Christmas Eve, Adult Protective Services did show up, just like Jason promised. A woman named Denise and a man named Robert stood in my doorway with clipboards and careful expressions. They asked if I was safe, if I had food, if anyone controlled my money. I smiled and answered politely, because I'm not a fool. Then I showed them the camera footage from 2:17 a.m. I showed them the power of attorney form I found in my drawer. I showed them the credit report. Denise's expression changed as she flipped through the pages. "Mr. Barton, did your family open these accounts?" "I didn't," I said. Robert cleared his throat. "We may need to refer this to law enforcement." "I already did," I replied. I watched them leave, and the irony of it hit me like a bitter joke. Jason tried to use a government agency to paint me as helpless, and instead he handed me witnesses. Christmas Day was quiet. I spent it with my grandchildren, because Jason and Claire brought them back that afternoon for Christmas dinner, as if I were a decoration they could arrange at will. Jason was careful in front of his parents, polite, smiling. The kind of man who could hold a baby and stab you in the ribs later. I played my part too. I hugged Lily and Evan. I smiled for photos. I ate turkey. I made small talk. And I listened. At one point, while everyone else was in the kitchen, Jason's mother asked Claire, "How's your dad doing living downstairs?" Claire glanced at Jason, then forced a laugh. "He's fine. We're figuring it out." Jason's hand settled on Claire's shoulder like a claim. "Timothy's adjusting," Jason said. "But after the holidays, we're making some changes. For everyone's good." His father nodded approvingly. "That's responsible." Responsible. Another pretty word for theft. I looked up at Jason and met his eyes. He smiled, confident, like he was already counting my money. I smiled back, because the hardest part of revenge is patience. They left the next morning for a 4-day trip to Jason's parents' lake cabin. Claire told me they needed family time. Jason told me to keep the basement tidy, because they'd have guests over for New Year's. As their SUV disappeared down the street, I sat at my kitchenette table and made the last call I needed. I called a locksmith. Then I called a moving company. Then I called Daniel Hargrove and said, "Do it." 2 hours later, Daniel called me back. "Process server will meet them when they return," he said. "And Timothy, you should not be in the house when it happens." "I won't be," I said, because that night I packed, not in panic, in precision. I took only what mattered: Marlene's photo, my clothes, my tools, the box of Christmas ornaments she loved, and a folder of documents that represented my life's work. At dawn, I drove to my own house and slept in my own bed for the first time in 2 years. The cameras pinged me at 2:11 a.m. again. Motion detected. This time, a different figure. Claire. She stepped onto my porch, looked around, and tried the key again. It didn't work. She knocked softly, as if politeness could unlock what betrayal had sealed. Then she did the thing that turned my stomach. She pulled out her phone and called someone. I could see her lips moving, tense, urgent. Jason. She wasn't checking on me. She was coordinating. I didn't answer. I let the camera record. I let the silence speak for me. And then came the second hook, the moment the story stopped being about hurt feelings and became something else entirely. At 3:08 a.m., the camera caught Jason. He arrived 10 minutes after Claire, got out of his truck, and walked up to my door with purpose. He wasn't there to talk. He was there to force his way in. He pulled something from the truck bed, a small crowbar. I watched on my phone as the man married to my daughter tried to break into my home. The crowbar slid under the door jamb. Jason leaned his weight into it. The door didn't budge because the frame was reinforced. He tried again, harder. The camera caught his face twisted with frustration. Then he stepped back and looked directly at the camera. He saw it. He froze. And for a split second, his eyes widened with something that finally looked like fear. He backed away, shoved the crowbar into the truck, and drove off. I sat in my dark bedroom, phone glowing in my hands, and realized I hadn't just avoided a betrayal. I'd avoided a crime scene. The next day, I walked into the police station with a folder. The officer at the desk was younger than my grandchildren's babysitter, but his eyes sharpened when I played the footage. Attempted break-in, fraud, identity theft. He asked, "Do you want to press charges?" I thought about Claire's face when she was little, the way she used to run into my arms, the way Marlene used to say, "She's got your heart, Tim." Then I thought about the power of attorney form, the credit cards, the whisper. "We'll kick him out after Christmas." "Yes," I said, "I do." When Jason and Claire returned from their trip, they came home smiling. I know that because the neighbor across the street later told me she watched their SUV pull in, loaded with leftovers and holiday gifts, and she said Claire looked relaxed. Relaxed is what people look like right before the floor drops. The locks didn't accept their keys. They tried the front door. Nothing. They tried the garage keypad. Reset. Jason yanked harder, like force could rewrite reality. Then he saw the envelope taped to the door. It was from Daniel. Inside were several documents, and one short note written in plain language so even someone like Jason couldn't pretend not to understand. You are hereby notified that Timothy Barton has terminated all financial support effective immediately. Due to fraudulent activity associated with his identity and attempted unlawful entry to his personal residence, Timothy Barton is exercising his legal rights as co-owner of the property located at. Jason's name wasn't on the deed, and for the first time, that mattered. Claire read the note out loud, her voice cracking. Jason's face shifted through disbelief, anger, and then something uglier. "Where is he?" he hissed. That's when the process server walked up the driveway. Jason tried to argue, tried to refuse the papers, tried to push them away. The man simply set them down on the hood of the SUV and said, "You've been served." And then, as if the universe wanted symmetry, another car pulled up behind them. A patrol car. Jason's shoulders went rigid. The officer stepped out, calm and professional, and asked Jason to step aside. Claire stood frozen on the porch, holding the papers like they were burning her hands. Jason tried to play the wounded family man. "This is a misunderstanding. He's old. He's confused." The officer's eyes didn't change. "Sir, we have video." Video. That word has weight when you've been lying. Jason's mouth opened, then closed. The officer read him his rights. Claire started to cry, making a small broken sound. Jason looked back at her, furious, and I saw it plainly. He didn't love my daughter. He loved the life he built by standing on other people. And now the foundation was gone. By the end of that day, Jason was out on bail. Claire was still in the house, but only because the paperwork hadn't finished doing what paperwork does. Daniel told me to be patient. So I was. In the meantime, the fraud investigation moved. Those credit cards were frozen. The lenders wanted statements. The bank wanted explanations. Jason's employer received inquiries about his financial stability because he worked in a position that required trust. People like Jason are always careful until they have to answer questions in writing. 2 weeks later, Jason lost his job. They called it administrative leave pending investigation, at first. Then it became termination. Claire called me that night. The phone rang, and when I finally answered, her voice fell apart in my ear. "Dad," she sobbed, "please, please, we made a mistake." I sat in my living room with Marlene's photo on the mantel and listened to my daughter cry like she used to cry when she was small. "What mistake did you make, Claire?" I asked softly. She swallowed. Jason said it was just paperwork, that it was just to protect us if something happened to you. "And you believed him?" I asked. Silence. Then she whispered, "I wanted it to be true." That admission hurt worse than Jason's whisper because it was honest. The next day, Claire showed up at my house. Not the basement. My house. She stood on my porch with no makeup, eyes swollen, hands shaking. "I didn't know he would break in," she said immediately, as if that was her defense. "I didn't know he opened credit cards." I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. I held up my phone and showed her the camera footage of her at my door at 2:11 a.m., calling Jason. Claire's face crumpled. "I panicked," she whispered. "You planned," I corrected. "You just didn't like seeing the evidence." She sank onto the porch step like her legs stopped working. "I thought we were drowning," she said. "Jason said we were drowning, and he said your money was sitting there, and he said you wouldn't even notice, and he said you'd kick me out after Christmas," I finished. Claire flinched like I struck her. "You heard that," she breathed. "Yes," I said, "and you didn't correct him." She covered her face with her hands. I could have taken comfort in her tears. I could have savored it. Instead, I felt tired. Because revenge isn't satisfying the way people think. It's not fireworks. It's not laughter. It's a quiet, cold feeling of watching someone experience the consequences they believed they could avoid. I told Claire the truth Daniel insisted on. "I rewrote my will," I said. There's a trust for Lily and Evan. Their futures are protected. But you and Jason get nothing from me directly. Claire looked up, eyes desperate. Dad, please. We need help. The mortgage is your responsibility, I said. Mine was a choice, and you used my choices like a weapon. Claire's lips trembled. We'll lose the house. I nodded once. Yes, you might. She stared at me like she expected me to rescue her, because I always had. But I wasn't the man in the basement anymore. I was the man who owned his life. Can I at least bring the kids to see you? She asked, voice small. You can, I said. But Jason doesn't come here. Her breath hitched. He's their father. And I'm your father, I replied. And you were going to sign me away. Claire stood slowly, wobbling. Then she whispered, He says you're doing this to punish me. I looked her straight in the eye. I'm doing this to survive. The foreclosure came 3 months later, not because I forced it, though I could have, because Jason and Claire couldn't keep up without my money, and the lie of their lifestyle finally met the math of their reality. Jason tried to fight in court. He tried to claim he was entitled because he supported the household. He tried to say I was vindictive. The judge didn't care about feelings. The judge cared about signatures. Jason had no claim. They moved into a rental across town, smaller, cramped, humbling. Jason's parents stopped answering his calls when they realized he wasn't a misunderstood victim. He was a liability. And then the final blow arrived, the one Jason never anticipated because it came from the one place he thought I'd never use. The law. The fraud case closed with findings that made it impossible to pretend it was an accident. Jason was charged. Claire wasn't charged as severely because she cooperated, because she told the truth, because she finally chose her children over her husband's schemes. Jason pleaded down to avoid a trial, but he still walked into a courtroom and heard a judge describe him as a man who exploited an elderly family member for financial gain. That sentence ruins a certain type of man, the kind who lives on reputation, the kind who believes consequences are for other people. By the time it was over, Jason had lost his job, his marriage, his social standing, and the illusion that he was smarter than everyone else. Claire lost the life she built on borrowed money. And I lost something too. I lost the version of family I thought I had, but I gained something I hadn't felt since Marlene died. Peace. Lily and Evan come to my house every other weekend now. They help me cook. Lily reads at my kitchen table. Evan follows me around the garage like a shadow, asking how every tool works. Claire comes too, quieter now, careful, like a woman walking on a bridge she knows she helped set on fire. Sometimes I catch her watching me with a look that hurts to see, a mixture of shame and longing. She never asks me for money anymore. She asks me how I'm feeling. That is the only apology that matters. And when I sit alone at night, when the house creaks the way it always has, I think about that whisper. We'll kick him out after Christmas. They meant to ruin me, to strip me down to a confused old man with no house, no money, no voice. Instead, their own choices did the ruining. All I did was stop pretending and let the truth do what truth does when you document it properly. Revenge shouldn't be legal, but mine was. So tell me, was I wrong for pulling the lever that dropped the floor out from under them, or was I finally right to choose myself?
My grandpa's worst really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales like this, hit subscribe.